We will now look at two examples for calculating finance charges on credit cards. There are two methods that we will consider. Method 1 is based on the previous balance method. In that case, the borrower is charged interest or a finance charge on the previous balance from the previous charge period. Let's look at our example. In October, Peter charged all the supplies for his Halloween party to his Visa card. On November 5th, the billing date, Peter had a balance due of $275. From November 5th through December 4th, he did some shopping and charged items totaling $320, and he also made a payment of $145. Part A of the problem asks us to determine the finance charge due on December 5th, which is Peter's next billing date, using the previous balance method. We are to assume that the interest rate charged is 1.3% per month. The finance charge that we are looking for is based on the $275 balance due on November 5th. To find the finance charge due on December 5th, we use the simple interest formula. As you recall, that formula states that I is equal to P times R times T, where P is the principal. And again, our finance charge is based on the $275 balance. The R in our formula is the interest rate written as a decimal, so we'll say 0.013. And T is time, and our time is 1 month. And we just want to be sure that we are being consistent with our units. Because the interest rate is in terms of months, then we want to be sure that we're using a month expression here as well for the time. So we're going to multiply 275 times 0.013 times 1, and we get $3.58. So $3.58 is the finance charge that will be due on December 5th. Part B asks us to determine the new account balance on December 5th. So let's think about what has happened. On November 5th, he had a balance due of $275. Between November 5th and December 4th, he charged an additional $320. He also accrued a finance charge of $3.58 that we calculated in Part A. He also made a payment of $145, so I'm going to subtract the $145 payment. So the new account balance will be found by adding 275, 320, 3.58 together and subtracting his payment of $145. So he now owes $453.58. Let's move on to method 2. Method 2 is referred to as the average daily balance method. Many lending institutions use this method for calculating the finance charge because they believe that it is more fair to the customer. With this method, the balance is determined each day of the billing period for which there is a transaction made in the account. Let's look at our example. The balance on Allison's credit card account on July 1st, the billing date, was $375.80. The following transactions occurred during the month of July. On July 5th, she made a payment of $150. On July 10th, she made a charge to the toy store for $74.35. On July 18th, she made a payment to the garage for $123.50. And on July 28th, she made a charge at a restaurant for $42.50. Part A of the problem is asking us to determine the average daily balance for the billing period. So what we need to do is we need to find the balance that's due for each transaction date. So we know that on July 1st, that her balance was $375.80. We know that on July 5th, she made a payment. So I'm going to take that $375.80 balance, and I'm going to subtract off her payment. And so at that point, she owes $225.80. On July 10th, she made a charge. So I'm going to take her current balance of $225.80, and I'm going to add the charge to the toy store, which brings her balance to $300.15. On July 18th, I'm going to take her balance of $300.15 and note that she made another charge in the amount of $123.50, which makes her total amount due $423.65. And then finally, on July 28th, I'm going to take her current balance of $423.65 and note that she made an additional charge in the amount of $42.50, which brings her total to $466.15. So at the end of the billing period, she owes $466.15. Now, the next thing that I need to do to calculate my average daily balance is I need to look at how many days elapsed in between each of these particular dates where she made a charge or where she made a payment. In other words, we're looking for the number of days where the balance did not change in between each transaction. So I'm going to free up a little room here for us, and we're going to work on this second part. I'm just going to write our balances down here next to the dates. Okay, so let's count the number of days. So between July 1st and July 5th, there are 4 days that the balance did not change. So I'm going to place a 4 right there on the first row. Between July 5th and July 10th, there were 5 days that the balance remained $225.80. Between July 10th and July 18th, there were 8 days that the balance remained $300.15. Between July 18th and July 28th, there were 10 days that the balance remained $423.65. And then between July 28th and the end of the month, July 28th, July 29th, July 30th, July 31st, there were 4 days that the balance stayed the same. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to multiply the balance times the number of days that we had that particular balance. And we're going to write our result down. So on the first one, I'm going to do 375.8 times 4, and that gives me 1503.20. For the next one, I'm going to multiply 225.80 times the 5 days that we had that balance. That gives me 1129. 300.15 times 8 days at that balance, 2401.20. 423.65, and that balance held for 10 days, 4236.50. And finally, 466.15 times the 4 days that we had that balance, 1864.60. And then we're going to add those balances up. So when we add those 5 numbers up, that gives me $11,134.50. Now remember that we're taking an average. So I'm now going to take that sum and I'm going to divide it by the number of days, which is 31. There are 31 days in the month of July. And so we're going to divide 11,134.50 by 31. And that's going to give me $359.18. And that is my answer for the average daily balance for the billing period. For part B of this problem, we're being asked to find the finance charge to be paid on August 1st, which is her next billing date. We're assuming that the interest rate is 1.3% per month. So remember, to find the finance charge, we use the simple interest formula. So I is equal to P times R times T. We know that the principal is $359.18. That is our average daily balance. And remember that that is what we're using in this method to calculate the finance charge. So average daily balance is $359.18. That's what we found on the last slide. The interest rate as a decimal is 0.013, and the time is 1. Okay, again, if your interest rate is in terms of months, your time is in terms of months. So we're going to multiply this together, and that is going to give me $4.67 for my finance charge. The last part of this question asks us to determine the balance due on August 1st. Recall that the balance of her purchases minus her payments, the final balance was $466.15. And we have this finance charge that has accrued during the month of $467. So we're going to add those two together to get our balance due. And so we would have $470.82 as our balance due on August 1st.